The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek episode 86.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the latest Picard episode, Maps and Legends. And joining me today on the panel are Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going, Dom?
Very well, thanks. And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, if you can, we would really greatly appreciate it if you'd share the podcast with your Trekkie friends and help us grow our audience of listeners, and maybe they'd be interested in what we have to say about Picard, Discovery, and any other shows that are coming, and when we talk about classic Star Trek as well. So just encourage others to check us out and see what we have to say about these things. We'd really appreciate it. I do want to start with a little discussion of something I saw on the CBS All Access YouTube channel. They have a weekly show called Ready Room, hosted by Will Wheaton, where every week they talk about Picard, and they also give some behind-the-scenes information. And one of the things that came up was that the composer of the theme music, Jeff Russo, the theme music that last time I said I liked so much, mentioned that the flute that they have at the beginning, it recalls Picard's Resekian flute from the TNG episode Inner Light, which Jimmy so helpfully reminds me of the title of every time I forget, because I can never seem to remember it. So I thought that was kind of neat. And also, this most recent episode of Ready Room, Will Wheaton interviews Akiva Goldsman, one of the executive producers of the show, one of the showrunners, and he made the distinction that Picard is sci-fi drama, where Discovery is sci-fi action. And there's a lot more things blowing up in Discovery than there is on Picard, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, there are other variations too, like sci-fi political thriller, which is Babylon 5, or sci-fi western, which is Serenity, or sci-fi comedy, which is The Orville.
Right. Yep.
I want to see sci-fi mystery.
That would be interesting. Has there been?
Well, people have already been joking about, CSI Regular 4 or something like that.
24th century police procedural.
No, that would be, yeah. Well, The Expanse had a little bit of that for a while, but yeah, that would be interesting. So I thought it was interesting. He gave some interesting insights, a lot of interesting behind the scenes of the way they think about the series and how it fits in with things. And I think it makes sense for Picard to be more drama than action, given that the lead character is nearly 80 years old now. Tough for him to kind of to do a lot of that action. And then they also said that the first 3 episodes of this series act like a self-contained pilot for the series. So sort of like the first 2 episodes of Discovery were a pilot for that series. So very interesting. Helps you understand how things are developing as they do in this.
That makes sense, because there was as they were releasing Picard, they released, or they showed at a major convention somewhere, I don't remember where here in the United States, but that the first 3 episodes, and they said that this was the first 3 episodes were before he goes into space. It's the 3rd episode he goes into space. So that, first of all, that's something for us to look for the next week, but that explains why they did those 3 episodes, because they're saying like these 3 episodes are one, they're like a 3-parter more than a 3 individual episodes.
It's the first act of a 10-hour movie.
Yes. In fact, that's one of the things Goldsman was saying, was that in the old TNG era or TOS era, each individual episode was sort of a self-contained story, and you could do different kinds of stories in each of those. Whereas in the new serialized way of doing things, the season is one episode, essentially one story. Right. So it's very interesting. So you can check that out on the CBS All Access YouTube channel. They call it Ready Room. It's interesting behind the scenes. So let's talk about this episode. It starts off on First Contact Day, 14 years previously to the events we've been watching.
And that allows us to establish that the Picard series main time frame is 2399.
Right. Because, yes, because we've seen that the
Synth attack is in 2385.
Right.
In April 5th, First Contact Day.
Right. That's when Zefram Cochrane and the crew of the Enterprise met the Vulcans for the first time.
In Bozeman, Montana, where you live, Father Corey. How far is Bozeman? How far is Bozeman from you?
About a 5-hour drive.
Uh-huh.
Which on Montana standards means about 300 miles.
That's in the western United States, west of the Mississippi. Long distances are long.
Well, and sometimes they're longer than they need to be. I've driven back from Los Angeles to San Diego on a Sunday afternoon, and it's taken 5 hours. But that's because of traffic.
It's not as far as in distance. So we have this. At Utopia Planitia shipyards, we see the civilian workforce with the blue-collar workers of the Federation, which is a nice new viewpoint we get to have. And this is the day of the attack on Mars by rogue synths. And we see them interacting with the synths.
In a way that's not entirely flattering to the human beings. In fact, frankly, is not flattering to the human beings. The first thing we see is a guy comes up to a room of synths who are just standing there, like apparently they've been there all night, and this is their wake up, go to work call, and he opens the door and says, "Good morning, plastic people." And so we get some nice othering right out of the box.
Right.
And they're like, "Good morning, Mr. Pincus." And then they all go to work, and then we see them with interacting with other humans who are complaining that they don't have First Contact Day off. And they're cracking jokes with the synths that the synths clearly don't understand, but the humans are enjoying themselves. So it's like having fun at the expense of someone who can't keep up with you. And this is not a flattering picture of humanity. And some people might think, oh, well, it violates Gene Roddenberry's dream of imperfect humanity. But if you think about the original series, you had Cyrano Jones, you had Harry Mudd, you had the women who went along with Harry Mudd, you had the miners who were buying the mail order brides from Harry Mudd, and you had a lot of flawed humanity. People, most of the time on the show, the people we see are military, and they have a kind of idealized military culture. But civilian culture is always different than military culture, and so it's nice to see that, even if it's a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's one thing I kind of mentioned when we talked about the Children of Mars, a short trek. We really don't know what civilian transport looks like on Earth in a normal basis. We see Federation and Starfleet transport all the time, but as far as the actual what day-to-day civilians will use, so it makes sense that they would have a shuttlecraft maybe based off an older shuttlecraft model and everything. But with the synths too, it's you look at them and they kind of sort of resemble Data, where they've got the yellowish eyes and all that.
And the
pale
weird
skin.
color skin.
Weird color skin and everything. But it's clear they're not as developed as Data was, that they are essentially machines, and like the machinery, like the heavy equipment that you would use on a construction site. I mean, they're kind of the overglorified version of that. They're just, they look humanoid, but they don't have the artificial intelligence beyond for self-awareness. They just have enough artificial intelligence to do their job, whereas Data had self-awareness. I mean, that was the whole point of the episode Measure of a Man with Bruce Maddox.
Do you remember in Voyager when we learned that the Mark I EMH, the emergency medical hologram, they were all decommissioned and sent to clean out, dangerous antimatter tanks or something silly like that?
Well, they do like all the difficult tasks, like mining. Like they showed some of them were miners out on an asteroid somewhere. Others were doing, like, they would go clean out the baffles of the antimatter tanks or something like that.
And in that case, the EMHs were much more self-aware than even these androids are. So it's kind of an interesting factor. Yeah, Jimmy, you and I once had a conversation. I forget exactly where about, that you said, I don't use please and thank you to my, Amazon Echo or my Siri, because they're just machines. Is that different or similar? How would you say that?
Well, I think there's an analog here to the way we interact with animals. Animals do not have rights. And so it is perfectly fine to use animals to meet human needs, including killing them and eating them. In the same way, robots do not have rights, and they're even lower than animals in that respect. At least animals can feel stuff. Machines cannot feel stuff.
Right.
So machines do not have rights. It is totally okay to use machines to fulfill human needs. You don't need to be polite to them, at least at the level they are right now. But there's another side to this, which is even though with animals they don't have rights, we, because of our human nature, have kindness built into us that requires us not to cause unnecessary suffering. So even if it's okay to raise animals to be food for humans, for example, you need to do it humanely. We don't want to cause unnecessary suffering to animals. We have it built into us that we need to be kind when we can. And if you have a machine that comes across as if it's just a human, so it's on our side of the uncanny valley, it feels like this is a human being, then there's something wrong with you if you treat it like it's not a human being. Right. I mean, you need to, at least, even though you may be aware this is just a machine, something is broken in you if you're okay with just being utterly cruel to something that feels to you like it's a human. There's something wrong in you if you're doing that, even though objectively it doesn't have any rights and frankly doesn't care. It may be programmed to act like it cares, but it actually doesn't care what you do with it.
Okay. Yeah, it's some of the way that some of the shipyard workers treat the synths feels a lot like what may have seen when there's like what we would have called as a kid the slow kid. The kid who doesn't quite get it, and so you kind of make a joke at his expense, and it's funny. Or the immigrant who doesn't quite speak the language and isn't fast enough. It comes across that way. Yeah,
these interactions feel broken.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although there is one worker who kind of sticks up for him, which it was an interesting dramatic effect that they've inserted here. And so what we have happen here is the synths are somehow they're compromised. We get a clear indication on screen that something comes in and changes the synth, especially the one that's in the room with the workers, and they start attacking.
He's got an interesting trait name. His name, which is right on his forehead, is F8. So what's about to happen is fate.
Right. Yep. Right. It's interesting. And so he starts attacking, killing the other workers, and then they destroy themselves.
Viciously.
Yes. Brutally. And then after he's done what he does, he shoots himself in the head with whatever the tool is that he's carrying.
Well, and they also the synths, they don't make it clear if it's this particular one that does it or if other ones do it, but they actually take over the planetary defense grid of Mars and turn the satellites onto the planet.
Right, and start shooting down, and this is the devastation of Mars that we've been told about in the past. All right, then we're back in the present day, and we have Laris and Picard and Zabin. And Laris, played by Orla Brady, who a Romulan with an unmistakable Irish lilt. I noticed there. I mean, I love her accent.
Which comes out really strongly when she gets upset later in the episode.
Yes. I noticed the Romulans all have accents from the British Isles in this.
Yes,
I guess that's the new thing.
Right.
I really love both Laris and Zabin.
Yeah,
I love how different they are and how they kind of play off of each other and barb each other a little bit.
I love the Romulans in this much more so than in TNG. In TNG, they just felt like strange. They had strange costumes and strange makeup. It's much more subtle and much more like the Vulcans. Really, I've always felt like the Vulcans were portrayed much more naturally than the Romulans were. So I really like the Romulans in this.
These Romulans are also emotionally, they're more relaxed and they have different personalities, and they're not these militaristic people strutting around.
Right. Not using contractions. I mean, failing to use contractions. That's what I mean.
So speaking of word choice, this is the most cuss-laden episode of Star Trek ever.
Yeah.
We have like 5 different cuss words in this 5 cuss word uses in this episode. We have an S word, 2 F words,
right,
a D word, and a GD word. So it's like, I'm not happy with this. This is one element of realism that reflects modern crude culture I could have done without.
Yeah,
right, including the Starfleet Commander-in-Chief dropping the F-bomb on Picard. Yeah, that was it's jarring.
I will say, I mean, I agree. It didn't need to be there. But unlike Discovery, when they first dropped the F-bomb, this actually fit the contexts that they were used in.
Yeah, like a teenager using it for effect.
In some cases.
Yeah.
When Laris uses one of them, I don't think it fits the context, and she's a Romulan. This isn't part of her native vocabulary.
That's true. So we are back at the chateau, and Picard and Laris and Zabin are reviewing the security footage of Dodge's death, trying to figure out who did this. And Laris refers to something called Zhat Vash, the predecessor of the Tal Shiar secret police, a kind of Romulan Section 31, maybe?
Yeah, basically. And she speculates that the Tal Shiar are just a mask that Zhat Vash wears, and it's a deeper inner cabal within the Tal Shiar that is, and we're told the term Zhat Vash is used for the dead, who are the only reliable keepers of secrets. And so the purpose of this inner cabal is to keep a secret so profound and terrible that just learning it could break a person's mind. And so that's a promise to the viewers. We better get a pretty serious secret by the end of this. I mean, that can be hyperbole, but we still need a pretty monstrous secret. And it apparently has to do with artificial intelligence, because Laris goes on to say that Romulans don't have any AIs, they don't have any androids, they don't study cybernetics, even though there was a line about Data in TNG about Romulan cyberneticists would love to study him.
Yes.
And so the Zhat Vash apparently has some really intense anti-artificial intelligence ideology that
motivates
enforcing and are even conducting operations well outside the Romulan Empire to pursue this ideology. Now, what that immediately makes me wonder is Zhat Vash itself AI? And are they secretly, and have they secretly for centuries been running the Romulan Empire?
Does this maybe connect to Discovery? In the AI
a lot of that
Discovery.
as well, yeah. And I've seen this in other sci-fi things like Larry Niven's Fleet of Worlds series, where you have an AI running things that
doesn't like the competition,
doesn't, and that but that passes itself off as something else.
Interesting. Person of Interest, the TV series, had something similar to that as well. I like that Zhat Vash is basically a pirate slogan. Dead men tell no tales.
Yeah.
So that's I like that. So and it's thousands of years old, but that's one of the other things she says. The secret. So it's interesting then that we have the Romulans digging around, and we'll get to this, but digging around in an abandoned Borg cube, which is essentially AI cybernetics, etc. So that should be important. So Picard and Laris travel to Boston to visit Daj's apartment, which has been super cleaned. And Laris uses some Romulan methods of forensic molecular reconstruction. It builds an image of what happened that night somehow through particle residuum.
This is pretty cool. This was an interesting extrapolation. Basically, the implication is that they can scan this room on a molecular level and reconstruct what happened here in the past.
Yeah.
And so we see a distorted image of the scene where Daj is having her
date.
dinner with her date, with her boyfriend, and he goes to her replicator and says, "Your replicator menus are really tragic." And then it cuts off.
Yeah.
And Laris realizes that this is designed to look like instrument failure, but it's not. And they must have flooded this area with anti-leptons, which are a real thing. I mean, a lepton is like an electron a tau particle, a muon, or neutrino. And so there are anti-leptons, positrons are anti-electrons. And so apparently you flood a space with anti-leptons and it'll interfere with the ability to reconstruct, kind of like bleaching a scene, bleaching pigments away.
Yes. So they have to resort to other means to figure out what's going on. And they managed to use the metadata in Daj's communication logs to track down Soji.
She's basically got a desktop, but it looks like a little bar, which then projects a holographic flat screen above it. And I wondered, why didn't they just wipe the hard drive on the thing or just take the computer when they left? But my guess is all that data is really stored in the cloud somewhere, and they couldn't take down the entire cloud without it looking suspicious, so they scrambled the directories.
Laris also said that they purposely don't completely scrub everything clean, but they leave things that could look like it was missed, but is really innocuous.
Yeah.
Like the little computer.
Oh, I also like the fact that they're talking about like metadata from communications, which is precisely the sort of thing that the NSA and the FBI use today. It's a tool they use today. They don't know the content of the mess of your phone calls, but they can tell who you contacted.
Well, until they look up the content of your phone calls, they don't know.
That's why they want Apple to give them a backdoor into the end-to-end encryption of iMessage. That's that's some real world political stuff. But I like the fact that they bring this real current day technology into this. So they do track down Soji by this.
Well, I was going to say, a little irritated because they said that, all the data looks the same. It's like, no, the data should look different. Now, maybe encryption is going to change how it looks.
Right.
But the difference between a phone number encrypted and a text message encrypted is going to look a little bit different.
Yeah, I think there was a flaw in the dialogue here. Their explanation of this all looking the same and how we're going to get around that didn't fully work. But what they end up doing is saying, okay, since Daj has this twin sister, her AI might momentarily mistake it for her. And so we're going to look for error flags where it flagged something as a misidentification. And we're going to see if any of those are people that look like Daj. And they find some. And Laura says, and wherever her twin sister was calling from, it was off Earth, but apparently you can't read the planetary code of the incoming number.
Well, they said all they could find was a flag that it had come through subspace.
Yes.
That's all they could see.
Well, from secret Romulan space, apparently, which is where we go to, where we now have Narek, the Romulan, the hot Romulan, as they call him, and Soji, intimate, discussing the Borg cube that they're on, which Soji says isn't a Borg cube, but is actually, they call it the artifact. It's a cube that was lost and severed from the collective. So the Borg are not the real presence. So we don't have the Borg Queen and the Borg collective here. What we have are, it's sort of like a chopped off limb of the Borg collective. These individual Borg drones that they're,
and they missed an opportunity here because they have this question of can the collective reassert control over this thing, and they say the Vulcan guy Narek says, or the Romulan guy Narek says, no, it can't. That's not a real risk, because to protect itself when you have a Borg submatrix collapse, it isolates it to protect itself. And so they're treating this like a graveyard. And someone says, what does that make us? And the obvious answer is grave robbers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Egyptologists.
Yeah.
It all depends on the amount of time that's passed.
It'll be interesting, though, if they explore why this particular cube got cut off. Was it because of battle? I mean, it looks like it's battle damaged with the.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. It's there. I'm pretty sure they're going to reveal it next week. This was Hugh's cube.
Oh.
And so when Hugh the Borg got reassimilated, we knew his cube went down. We didn't know where, but apparently it was in Romulan space at the time.
That's good.
And so I'm guessing this is Hugh's cube. That's why it disconnected. And
that was kind of what I was thinking too. Was either it was damaged in battle and got disconnected, or it got infected. And that would, being Hugh's cube would be exactly that. What caused it to get infected.
Right. And the big chunks that are cut out of it, my guess is that's not battle damage. That's unless it's damaged. Well, Hughes Cube was never damaged that we saw. My guess is that's chunks that have been cut out by the Romulans who are profiting from this.
Right.
So this apparent scenario is the Romulans found this disabled cube in their territory. Their
harvesting
economy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but their economy has been severely damaged by the fact that they had the supernova that destroyed the home world, and so they desperately need resources and money, and they're cutting this thing up for profit. And but they can't do it themselves alone. So they've hired all these people from other cultures, including from the Federation, to come in. They don't have the experts they need because 900 million Romulans died or whatever. They have hired all of these foreign experts to come in and help them with this. Just like, during World War II, in the Manhattan Project, America desperately wanted to build an atomic bomb. We used all these scientists from over in Europe, even including from people who were former members of Axis countries, like Enrico Fermi, who was from Italy, or various German scientists who were like German Jews that had come over. And so I think you have a similar kind of project going on here, which involves, of course, profit, like it should.
Right.
And some of the drones are rescued. They're alive without their implants, and we see them working inside the cube. And we see others that don't survive. So we get a scene of that in a little bit. But like you said, they're extracting the Borg tech to rebuild their society.
Drones that don't survive. What are you thinking of? Because I don't recall that.
The scene where we see the nameless, where Soji says, "You're free now, my friend." That drone dies.
I didn't take that as the drone is dying. I took that as they're taking the parts off of this thing and they're reviving it.
We heard a heartbeat.
It's like
the sound effect that stopped. That's what I thought.
I didn't catch that. If that's the case,
I thought that's what we were hearing. It sounded like a heartbeat slowing down and stopping. But
I was in the impression that it was a drone that was actually already dead. But then again, you see a little bit of blood spurt when they remove the eye patch.
Yeah,
no, I don't know.
Nice body horror in that one.
I guess we'll find out next episode probably whether they're reviving these drones, because that's my sense is it was all these drones have all been in stasis and then they're reviving them one at a time and liberating them and patching them up.
I got the sense they were reviving some that could survive and others that don't survive the procedure. Like there's some that survive the procedure and some that don't, depending on how integrated they are. But we'll see. We'll definitely see. I actually saw the preview episode for next week that kind of hints that we'll see something about that. So even though Narek and Soji are intimate, Narek is a Romulan and won't tell her anything about himself. I think Soji's
really
foolish,
coy about it. He's being romantically playful.
Yes, but there's a little bit of sinister in it too, just because he's a Romulan. I think she's foolish for getting involved with him in this way, even if she knows nothing about him.
They've kind of set this up though that Romulan culture as a whole is secretive. I mean,
yes,
Laris mentions that calling the Romulan secret police is kind of redundant, because all Romulans are secret.
Yeah,
I like how when she's asking him a question about himself, and he says, "Can you keep a secret?" And she says, "Yes, so can I."
Yeah, that was a good one.
And proceeds not to tell her.
Yes, that's a good one. Then we have another scene where we get potentially a very big character development moment for Picard, where he sees his doctor, who apparently he served with on the Stargazer, Dr. Benayoun, who tells him he's in great health except for one abnormality in his parietal lobe, some kind of terminal condition, something that's going to kill him in a year or so, I think is what they said.
At some point, although he mentioned some things that it can be treated.
Yes.
And this links back directly into the final episode of TNG, All Good Things, because the plot was driven by the fact that Picard had this abnormality in his parietal lobe that would eventually, in the alternate future we saw, which is also set in the 2390s, would lead to him having Irumodic syndrome. So they had already established this defect in his parietal lobe, and it's paying off in this timeline as well.
Of course, there is an elephant in the room in this scene, which I'm okay with. They don't have to necessarily answer this yet, but where's Beverly?
Yeah.
Who is this guy? His doctor? Where? Like, that's the big question I've had so far, because we've had mention of the other crew, but not of Beverly, and that's a big one to me.
And they could establish she's dead. I hope they don't do that, because there's no even if Gates McFadden said, I don't want to reprise this part, you don't need to kill her off. That's just going to make fans unhappy.
Yeah,
you know. And if you wanted to kill her off, the way to do it would be bring her back and give her a really big goodbye.
Right, not off screen.
But don't kill her off just because the actress is unavailable. I would assume, if I were writing it, I would assume she's off. I mean, she has her own career. She's off being head of Starfleet Medical or something. Yes. And so Picard has this other doctor who he knew from the past.
Yeah, I mean, in the secondary media, the books, they establish that they end up getting married and have a child and that sort of thing. That, of course, they don't have to follow that, of course, but it'd be interesting that if they stayed connected somehow.
Well, that's where they could even throw back to All Good Things, where she was captain of the medical ship.
The Pasteur, yeah. So Picard, the reason he went to the doctor is he's looking to get certified to Starfleet as fit for interstellar service. And the doctor says, I don't know what kind of trouble you're planning to get into, but if you're lucky, maybe it will kill you first before the disease kills him. That's pretty dark. But
but the doctor basically acknowledges you meet the requirements for going into space for Starfleet, even if you have a condition that may kill you in a few years.
Right. So Picard's off to Starfleet headquarters. I like these interesting new instantaneous transporters.
Stepping discs
that apparently know where you're going when you step through it. Like you've already programmed it or something. Maybe they're point to point.
Something that you program your comm badge and it reads your comm badge as you walk up to it and beams you over there.
Yeah. I like advancing technology. That's good.
Yeah. Incidentally, this technology has been used extensively in Larry Niven's Known Space series. The Puppeteer homeworld is covered with stepping discs, and they have many creative applications that get fleshed out.
That could be interesting, dramatic potential. So in the lobby of Starfleet headquarters, we have holo models of the various enterprises that are in the hovering above. That's a nice touch. At the reception,
or if not enterprises, at least varying ships, some of which have been Enterprise.
Yeah, the ones we see are enterprises.
Yeah, you see Constitution class, see the Galaxy class.
Yep. At the reception desk, the Picard tells the young man that he's got an appointment to see the commander in chief, and the guy says, "And your name?"
Yeah. This was in the trailers for this series. This was played much more for comedy than it is here.
Yeah.
It doesn't come across nearly as comedic.
Although Patrick Stewart he's polite. He doesn't do you know who I am? But you can see him kind of annoyed at the end of this interchange when the guy says, "Nice to see you up and around, Admiral."
Yeah.
Ouch. Yeah. Nice to see you're not dead yet.
Well, that part would be a little annoying, but when he's asked his name, he doesn't get annoyed. He's just, Picard, P-I-C-A-R-D.
He almost kind of goes, "Oh, wait, I'm not as famous now as I used to be."
Yeah, I'm not in uniform, etc. Right.
Yep.
So he meets with the Admiral Clancy. Her name is. She's the commander-in-chief, the Starfleet commander, who's hostile right from the start. She is not happy to see him.
Right.
She's the one who drops an F-bomb on him.
And part of the reason she's not happy is because he stormed out of this interview the other day on television, and that didn't make said the Starfleet wasn't Starfleet anymore.
Yeah. That doesn't endear you to the person in charge of Starfleet, that's for sure. He requests to be reinstated and given a ship and crew. And look, I know if it's a problem making me an admiral, so you could just make me a captain, which she calls hubris. Yeah. And she gets very angry at him for his hubris. And she said that there's this back and forth over this decision to abandon the Romulan evacuation after the attack on Mars. And she gives the other side from Picard's, which is, hey, 14 worlds threatened to secede if the Romulan rescue wasn't stopped. Like, this had the potential to destroy the Federation.
And that was before the synth attack. And then when the synth attack disabled our rescue fleet we were building, we didn't have the ships to go forward with the project.
Yep.
Right. And then she drops the bomb on him. She says, "There's no peril here in this, whatever it is you're trying to do."
he threatens her. He says, he doesn't say don't cross me, but basically that, and he tells her she's in peril here, and he says there's no peril here.
Yeah, only
this is delusions of an old man who wants to be relevant desperately.
Yeah, the pitiable delusions of a once great man desperate to matter. Ow, that burns. So,
and the thing is, her viewpoint here is a reasonable one.
Yes,
I mean, we know that Picard is the hero of the show, and so we identify him. But this is a reasonable viewpoint she's dropping on him.
And then we go back to the Borg cube where we have a nice plot move here, which is Soji is starting her new day, her day at the working at the cube, and there's a new person that she's going to help, and that helps introduce things to the viewer. It's a nice device that they use to kind of show us around while she's showing this new person around, and there are lots of non-Romulans there working on the cube. We have a reference to the Romulan Free State, which is a bit of irony.
I like the security briefing that they by the way, the new worker uniform is way too hard to use. This is the 24th century. It should automatically fit to you.
Yes.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Zippers are a problem
deprive that would deprive Soji of a chance to, and Soji, we should mention, is Daj's twin sister.
Yes.
But that would deprive Soji of a chance to help the newcomer and get past the exposition load. I do love the security briefing they have. I love the Romulan who delivers it. He is awesome. He is clearly enjoying giving the security briefing.
Then the sign we saw in the trailer, this facility has gone 5,843 days without an assimilation, which implies that this happened enough to have a sign.
Yeah, exactly.
They also have to wear these gray badges, which are reminiscent of dosimeters that people wear around nuclear facilities. So maybe they indicate that Borg nanites are active
or something. He says if it starts flashing green, run.
Yes, with a smile. He says it, and it's called the Borg Artifact Research Institute, which is apparently a euphemism because as we said, they're really harvesting tech to sell for their economy.
Also, the Trill lady that Soji helps asks her if she's researching the XBs, and that's apparently short for X-Borgs.
Right. There's a mention. Narek also shows up, talks to about the Borg cube being discarded by the collective, and that Soji's working to reclaim the drones. He doesn't say rescue them, which is interesting. And he also reveals that he doesn't need the permission of the director of the Institute or anyone to do whatever it is he wants there, which is also
he wants to. He doesn't say to do whatever I want. And he says it to the camera so she doesn't hear it, but he doesn't need permission of the director to come watch her work.
Right, that's right. We have back in the chateau, Dr. Girardi from the Daystrom Institute is now there with Picard. Picard says he reveals that he never really cared for science fiction because he doesn't get it.
He picks up a book of Isaac Asimov's Complete Robot.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a nice meta moment that the sci-fi hero doesn't really get sci-fi.
Yes.
Well, he
for
pretty
him,
much lives it, so.
Yeah, it's not science fiction for him. It's just life. Girardi says that Daj was too perfect a candidate.
Actually, just to touch on that for a second, sure. I've read a bunch of old sci-fi from before there was even a word for sci-fi. Mm-hmm. There was sci-fi being written, for example, in the 19th century. And there was even, the ancient Greeks story, A True Story, which was science fiction. But even much more recently, like in the 19th century, you had people like Edgar Allan Poe writing what now today we would call science fiction.
Right.
And some of it is set in the 20th century. And there's still an interest, even though we're way past this technologically, and we're now past the 20th century itself. There's still an interest and an appeal to seeing this science fiction. You can still appreciate it as science fiction, even though it's not how history played out, and even though we're more technologically advanced than this now.
Yeah.
Part
TOS,
of the interest
the original
is just
series.
seeing the differences in what they were thinking. A bunch of this 19th century science fiction thought suicide booths were going to be all over the place in the 20th century. It's like, well, that didn't happen.
Yeah, I was going to say that TOS, the original series, is like that for us. Frankenstein was kind of science fiction when you think about it.
Yeah.
which is kind of relevant to what to the series, I guess. Frankenstein. So Girardi says that Daj, who was got candidate for the Daystrom Institute, we remember that from last episode. She was too perfect as a candidate for the Daystrom. Then we find out her entire identity was built all at once about 3 years previously. So now we have an age for Daj and Soji. And she says the question isn't what Daj was going after at Daystrom, but what about Soji? Like, so instead of trying to figure out what Daj was going to be doing at Daystrom, she says we need to find out what's going on with Soji.
What's she trying to do? Right.
And I find it interesting too, like, why I asked myself at this point, and we find it a little later with the answer to this in part. Why haven't the Romulans found and eliminated Soji like they were trying to do with Daj? And we again, this gets answered, but it comes up here. So we have Soji
of course,
is
the Romulans weren't trying to destroy Daj. Right. They were trying to capture her, but then she activated, and so they tried to take her out.
Yeah. And this comes out because
Commander
the Admiral of Starfleet FaceTimes this Commodore, Commodore O. And I'm thinking, the Master has infiltrated this too? Really?
Yeah.
It's just another one of
Vulcan?
It's just another one of the Master's disguises. Now he's a Romulan pretending to be a Romulan female pretending to be a Vulcan.
Yes.
So the Romulans have infiltrated Starfleet, and so Commodore O is really a member of Zhat Vash.
Yep.
And she has a Lieutenant Rizzo, who is another Romulan that's had her ears bobbed, so she can masquerade as a human. And in the conversation between them, we find out that the Romulans were not trying to kill Daj, but to get her as an AI and study her. And then she ended up dying. Although I kind of partially wonder, because they scrubbed the scene, not just physically, but digitally, all the records of it. And that makes me wonder, could Daj, I assume they still have Daj's body, and she
got blown up.
Well, she got blown up, but that still leaves remains. And partly I wonder, there's a small chance they could even bring her back, but I don't think that's likely. But Commodore O, in talking to Rizzo, says, we had this one approach. It didn't work. We have one other approach, and you need to make sure that one goes right. And she's going, I've got my best man on it. And that turns out to be her baby brother, Narek.
Yes.
So, and she then FaceTimes with Narek over at the Artifact and is talking to him about what he's doing. And she acknowledges, yes, she approved this alternative approach for getting to Soji. And apparently what they're trying to find out is, where is the nest of her fellow abominations?
Right.
So there are other Daj-type androids out there.
Where's Maddox in creating these synths?
Presumably Maddox. And also Picard is now wanting to go find Maddox. So we have the Romulans and Picard both trying to find Maddox. And we're given to understand that there are other Sung-type androids that Maddox has at some nest somewhere. And Daj and Soji were two that were sent out to do stuff that should be revealed to us later. And what the Romulans want is to find out where's the nest so they can track it down and presumably do pest control on the nest.
Right. That's and apparently Commodore O is head of Starfleet intelligence, which is really kind of scary when you think about it. For the Starfleet, that this Romulan secret agent got to that position.
And for all of but we're betraying Gene Roddenberry's vision. Actually, first season Next Gen, when Gene Roddenberry was still actively involved, we had the conspiracy arc in Starfleet that involved the highest levels of Starfleet being compromised by aliens
on a regular basis, apparently. Because we get the founders.
Well, I like that line from Commodore O. If we had Romulans on this planet, I would know, and then you would know, And then everybody would know because this is a problem.
Yes, it turns out there are. She also refers to Picard as the Hermit of Labar, which I thought was interesting characterization of Picard by Starfleet officers. So we have Soji back on the cube, working in the operating room where the drones are reclaimed. The doctor who's doing the actual work, of taking the implants out, calls the drones the
Romulan
Nameless.
Doctor.
Yes. She refers to them as the Nameless. That's apparently the Romulan name for them. Soji says, I hate when you call them that, and says to the drone after the last major implant is removed, you're free now, my friend. So we talked about that before.
And she says it in a foreign language.
Presumably the language of whatever species the drone originally was.
So this is weird because in the dialogue, they seem to establish that the reason the Romulans are calling them Nameless is because they don't know the name of this species, whatever it is. It's humanoid, but they don't know what species this is. So it's some humanoid species from a part of the galaxy we haven't explored, so we don't know their name, so we're calling them the Nameless. And Soji doesn't like that. And the Romulan doctor says, well, Nameless is a name.
Yes.
And but then Soji talks to it in this foreign language. And in a preview for next week, we have a character who I won't mention the name of talking to Soji and saying, greeting or speaking to a Nameless in his own tongue is really amazing.
Right.
So maybe Soji has a database in her android brain somewhere where she knows about this species and its language or something. Will
maybe make people suspicious of her. Interesting. So Picard at home in the chateau, contemplating things, pulls out his old comm badge and his old Starfleet style comm badge, and calls. We'll find out will be Raffi, his former last first officer. Which is immediately says, please don't hang up. I need your help. I need a ship. And then we get a little hint of the TNG theme song, by the way, right there, which is interesting. So we are clearly told that please don't hang up means that there's some bad blood.
Yeah. And this we should also mention. So where Raffi comes from is if you've followed the spinoff media, she's in the Star Trek Picard Countdown comic. And she was his first officer, not on the Stargazer and not on the Enterprise, but on another ship he had after that.
Right.
And if you want to know more about that, become a patron of SQPN and you'll get access to our patrons episode review of the Star Trek Picard Countdown series.
Yes.
In a timely manner. I'm sure we'll eventually release it to everybody.
Yes.
Yep.
So Laris is mad at Picard, who wants to go, and she says again,
drops a tea set.
Yes, and drops the Irish brogue lilt on him too, which was a lot of fun. And
what I love, because she's telling Picard, it's like, this is incredibly dangerous. You can't go do this.
Yes.
And the male Romulan companion, I'm blanking on his name again.
Zabin.
Zabin, yeah. He's like, clearly she's right. You need us to come with you.
Yes. Like, you're both idiots.
And she's like, okay, take that one and you two can go die together.
Yeah. Right. A little bit of that Romulan fire. Yeah.
One thing we do learn, we'd kind of brought up before was in the comic, LaForge was in charge of Utopia Planitia before the attack, if not during the attack, but he's still alive.
Right.
Because he's mentioned, contact Riker, Worf, LaForge, so we know he's still alive.
That's actually a really good thing that they do here, because our natural inclination to say, well, Picard needs a crew. If he called Worf and Riker and Geordi and all the rest, they'd show up, wouldn't they? And of course they would. Yeah. And he says he doesn't want to.
Yeah, he says he doesn't want to because he knows they would help and he doesn't want them putting themselves at risk for him again. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to find people I don't care about. Essentially. And they're going to be the ones to help me. They
point that out. Well, fine. You got to find someone you hate, but
who hates you.
Someone who hates you.
Hates you and is still willing to help you.
And has nothing to lose.
He's
like, I have just the person in mind. And that's when he takes a taxi shuttle out to someplace called Vasquez Rocks.
Yes, I loved seeing Vasquez Rocks. So Vasquez Rocks is a place here in California. It is kind of a little bit northeast of Los Angeles. And it's a park. So nobody's plopping down their double wide there.
24th century double wides.
Yeah, but and if you go there, and I've been there, if you go there are all these signs about watch out for snakes. But this is the place where Kirk fought the Gorn.
Right.
And there's a good reason you only see the rocks from this angle. Actually, they're in a bunch of early TNG or early TOS episodes. There are several of them. But in the Gorn episode, you only see the rocks from this one angle. And that's not just because the rocks are very picturesque. It's because if you turn the camera around, there's a freeway there. But these rocks show up in lots of media, and in particular in lots of Star Trek. They're used with some photo manipulation in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie for Vulcan.
Okay.
And I love the idea that Raffi just lives at Vasquez Rocks, because this is not Vulcan. It's not some Gorn, Cestus 3 planet. This is Earth. And you put these things on Earth, and that means she lives at Vasquez Rocks in California.
Which apparently is not a park in the 24th century.
Yeah.
So Picard takes a taxi shuttle to see Raffi out of Vasquez Rocks, who greets him with a phaser. So she's really mad at him. She says, "There isn't anything I want to hear from you." And he says, "Secret Romulan assassins are operating Earth," as he walks away. And that's enough to get her to change her
ask
mind.
About the wine that he's got.
And then
she's
interested in the particular vintage of wine.
Yeah. And I'm really curious. I'm looking forward to finding out, why does she hate him? What has changed? Why?
Yeah.
What happened between them to go from friends?
That is not covered in the comic.
Right.
Yeah.
See,
there's something that I hope they do kind of address in the series going forward. He's alienated Starfleet, and of course we know why based off of that Hollow news show. But there's something that started before that alienated the Admiral. He's alienated Raffi. We haven't got the clue that they've alienated the rest of the crew. Like, we know that Riker and Troy are going to be in this series.
Yeah.
And most likely next episode.
Yeah. And
it doesn't seem like, at least in the previews, that he's alienated them. Maybe he hasn't talked to them in a while, but he hasn't alienated them.
Right.
My guess is that Raffi, he alienated Starfleet and his crew from I forget the name of his later ship.
Verity.
Verity. Yep. At the same time, that when things went sour with the Romulan rescue, that he did something that alienated both. We know what he did that alienated Starfleet. He quit. But he also alienated Raffi at the same time.
Right. So, and then we end the episode with what you were talking about before, where Lieutenant Rizzo, who's the secret Romulan, visits via hologram her brother Narek on the cube, and Narek is apparently part of her team of the Zhat-Vash, and taking this friendlier approach to finding out from Soji where the nest is, and so on and so forth. And Rizzo is on her way to the cube. We found that out too.
Also, you're right. And when I get there, you better have made progress.
Right.
Also, earlier on in the conversation between O and Rizzo, they have this wordplay about the word unexpected and how it's bad for spycraft.
Yep.
And she comments that Narek has a capacity for that word that she finds disturbing. And that suggests to me Narek may eventually turn. He may eventually defend Soji in some way that displeases his sister Rizzo and Commodore O.
Right. So something you said, Father Corey, that you think maybe see Riker next episode. I'm thinking we might not, because I think Jonathan Frakes directs the episode he's in, I think. And the next one is directed by Hanley Culpepper again. She directed the first episode.
The only reason I mentioned that is apparently Riker and Troy are in Alaska on Earth, obviously.
And they're still on Earth.
This is supposed to be, this next episode is supposed to be the one where they leave to go off into space and find Bruce Maddox, et cetera, et cetera.
Perhaps.
And so that's just my speculation. I don't know if that's true or not. So
I was thinking the episode, the fifth episode, which is titled Stardust City Rag, sounds like a Riker title. Given Rag refers to music and Riker's the trombonist there.
That could be true, though.
Yeah, but it's interesting. So that brings us to the end of this episode, and we've got the next one coming up. So it'll be interesting to see how they complete this arc and get Picard into space. Any last thoughts? We've got some feedback I want to cover, but any last thoughts on this episode?
Couple of things. Lieutenant Rizzo is played by Peyton List, who, if you watch Smallville, she was Lucy Lane. She's been on other things with the CW, the recreation of the Tomorrow People and other things like that. So she kind of shows up every once in a while. And then
go ahead.
Oh no, just a different one. I like it the conversation on Mars before the attack. They show the food replicator. It looks like a 3D printer, and they talk about how the they want the food replicator to go back to the Una Animal Matrix.
Yeah,
and that probably is a connection to the Una Glucose Matrix from the Q&A short trek.
That's good. That's good.
Also, the reason the food replicator looks like a 3D printer is because that's what it is. They took a 3D printer and filed the branding off of it and tricked it out a little bit to get the food replicator.
But it sounds like an old microwave with the ding.
Yes, I love the ding. Also, you mentioned casting, and Commodore O is played by Tamlin Tomita, who has been around in a variety of different things. She was the original assistant commander on Babylon 5 in the Babylon 5 pilot before Susan Ivanova. I
didn't recognize her.
Yeah, she also had a role as a biological scientist in a germ warfare series that got canceled really quick and almost nobody has seen, called The Burning Zone.
Okay. I recognized Peyton List from Colony, which was a recent series that she was on, and she's also on Gotham, which I haven't seen. But like
I said, she kind of shows up all over the place.
She works, which is a compliment for actors. They do a lot of work. Cool. Yeah, there's some good casting. I thought, by the way, Narek, the actor who plays Narek, is Harry Treadaway, but I thought it was going to turn out to be the same guy who played Peter Pan in Once Upon a Time, the character, because they look a lot alike, but he's not. He's also shown up. That same actor who played Peter Pan showed up on Doctor Who at one point.
That's right.
But
I think the Romulans in this look like elves.
Well, there's an interesting in the most recent episode of the Ready Room video. There's an interview with the lead costume and character designer who talks about the design of the Romulans and how tricky it is because they have those pointy ears and those eyebrows, and if you push it just too far, it becomes distinctly elvish, and that's the trick. So I like the design; it's much better than the TNG design, as I said before. But yes, and they showed how they do the eyebrows. Each hair of the eyebrow is individually tied in a like a lace matrix. It's fascinating. Anyway.
Yeah, they don't just glue stuff on anymore.
No, because of high definition, which is
exactly. It's got to look much better now.
Yes, they can't get away with it. All right, let's talk about some feedback from listeners on our last episode on Remembrance. Richard Lecco wrote on Facebook, "It's tough to protect someone when you have no idea who they are and who you need to protect them from," in reference to Picard protecting, beating himself up because he couldn't protect Daj. So that was a nice comment. Our friend Bennett Gillespie writes, "Great podcast and agree with much that was said. Spoiler if you haven't watched the show, but I shared Jimmy's feelings about the death of Daj. I liked her too and wanted to know more, but I wondered if, for me, it was more about the complete failure of Picard to be that protector, to keep her safe. Maybe I just need to rewatch." So Picard is the captain. He's the dad. He's the protector figure that we've always known. And he's an older man, and we have to get used to, just like with our own, real fathers, they get to a point where they're not the same. We have to look at them differently because they've changed. And I like that Picard is different. And then Kelly Brown writes, "I just finished listening. I was laughing at Jimmy's initial review. He really has the tone of the reviews from certain channels down pat." And then she says, "I love this episode and I'm very excited about this series. I can't wait to see where it goes. Patrick Stewart was, as usual, great. It's going to be interesting watching the other cast members come into the story. One complaint I do have was during the scene in the Daystrom Institute, when they were talking about how there was no other android like Data, I was shouting at my screen, what about Data's mother? In many ways, she was more advanced than Data, so much so that she didn't even know she was an android.
I think they may be able to explain that by the fact that even Data's mother didn't know she was an android. She was an android replacement for a human woman, and had the memories of the human woman, and so she thought she was a human woman and had elaborately been programmed to maintain this. And so this was found out only because Data picked up on the fact, because she's not like blinking into this according to a regular algorithm or something. And so very few people knew about her. At the end of that, they rebooted her and let her go on her way, still thinking she was a woman. So the only people who knew about this were a very small number of people. And even though a report likely might have been made about it in a captain's log or something, it's probably in a database somewhere, and this was not integrated into standard knowledge in the AI community.
Right. They would have kept that information very close. So as not to get that out there. But Picard presumably would remember her. Interesting. So that's it for feedback. And if we have nothing more to add on that, I want to just take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Christina H., Thomas A., Caleb F., Nick S., and Rob G. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of Maps and Legends? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send us an email to trek@sqpn.com. And we'll be back next time, and we'll be discussing the next episode, which is called The End is the Beginning. Until then, Father Corey Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
I'm glad to be here, and thank you, Dom.
And Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Thanks, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, I never really cared for science fiction. I guess I just don't get it.